Hi, welcome to Doses of Deception. I am your host, Bebe McGuire. As a seasoned nurse with more than 3 decades of experience, we will discuss various topics, exposing deception and empowering you with knowledge and information to foster critical thinking. This show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide medical advice. So please consult your trusted healthcare provider. So welcome to episode 6, everyone. I'm just going to make a little adjustment here. So, just want to add that. So we have a jam-packed episode for you tonight, so buckle up. Your support means the world to me. If you would, please follow my channel on Rumble or on X at BB_Maguire. That's MAGUIRE. If you need to contact me with questions, suggestions, or you're interested in sponsoring the show, you can email me at dosesofdeception@proton.me. Also, if you would, please smash that thumbs up button on Rumble or that little heart on X. It helps out so much. And most importantly, please share this video so others can be empowered too. So let's get to work. So, Dr. Cole over on X posted this. So let's get this straight. The U.S. has 4% of the world's population, 70% of the world's pharmaceutical profits, 50 to 90% of research is funded by Big Pharma. 38% of 12 to 19-year-olds are pre-diabetic. Only 7% of adults are metabolically healthy. We've seen a 50% drop in sperm counts in 40 years. We had the most pandemic deaths. We have the most chronic disease, the most autoimmune conditions, and the shortest lifespan. And yet this sick care system has the audacity to still tell us to sit down and shut up. Yeah, no. No. And then I wanted to show you this because I saw this week and I loved it. My favorite influencer is the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is my teacher, my counselor, my guide. All glory to God Almighty. So on April the 18th, America's frontline doctors reported the Louisiana Department of Health said it would no longer promote mass vaccination, according to a memo released by the state's Surgeon General. Louisiana state officials stressed that healthcare providers talk about benefits and risks posed by vaccines and answer all questions based on scientific evidence. So let's talk about informed consent. Understanding this will become important later as we dive into hydroxychloroquine. Informed consent is when a person voluntarily agrees to a proposed medical procedure, treatment, or participation in research after being fully informed of its purpose, benefits, risks, alternatives, and consequences. It requires the individual to have the capacity to understand and make decisions, and is provided clear and comprehensible information and gives consent, most importantly, freely, without coercion. Federal regulations govern informed consent in research, while state laws address medical treatment consent. On April 22nd, Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. and FDA Commissioner Marty Makary held a joint press event to announce the FDA's intent to phase out the use of petroleum-based synthetic dyes in the nation's food supply and medications. So let's take a look at RFK.
This is what most Americans innocently put into their bodies these days, and most alarmingly, into the bodies of their children. And it's no coincidence that Americans die earlier than Canadians or Germans or Italians or Japanese or Koreans or Australians or most any other comparable country. And it wasn't always that way. Until the early 1990s, our life expectancy was the same or better than other developed countries. Then suddenly, more and more Americans began suffering from chronic diseases, from obesity, cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and all kinds of autoimmune diseases. Our maternal mortality rate soared to the highest of any developed country on earth. Same with infant mortality. Like the frog in the slowly boiling water, we didn't really notice as we got sicker and sicker. We've grown now to accept chronic disease conditions as normal. But now, in 2024, we're finally waking up to this cataclysm, and we're asking ourselves, how in the world did this happen? Well, a big part of it is our diet. Restaurants that serve contaminated food are fined or shut down. But when it's the government that approves the poisons in our food, a few people get very, very rich, and the toxins end up in every supermarket aisle. Let me show you what I mean. Doritos, Cheez-Its, Cap'n Crunch, gummy bears. Everyone knows that these are junk foods, so maybe you wouldn't be too surprised to see that the ingredients include a lot of poisons, including a harmful yellow dye called tartrazine, or yellow dye number 5. What you may not know is that this dye was originally made out of the sludge that's left over when you turn coal into coke for blast furnaces. It's called coal tar, and I've actually sued many big industries for legacy contamination of coal tar all around the country because it's so toxic and it's so harmful to the environment and human beings. A century ago, it was just an obnoxious industrial byproduct that everybody was trying to figure out ways to get rid of. One of the ways that they did that was by paving roads. But then a British chemist figured out that the coal tar could be used to derive fabric dye. And if fabric dye, why not food? Food manufacturers began using it to cover up the discoloration of low-quality foods that they wanted to pass off on unsuspecting customers. They didn't know back then that this yellow dye, tartrazine, causes tumors, asthma, developmental delays, neurological damage, ADD, ADHD, hormone disruption, gene damage, anxiety, depression, intestinal injuries. Well, we know it now. We've known this for decades. That's why tartrazine is heavily restricted in other countries. In some countries, foods with tartrazine have a warning label that it may cause ADHD in children. Today, it's made from petroleum, not coal tar. Either way, it's crazy to add this to your kids' favorite foods. It doesn't even change the flavor. This yellow dye isn't just in junk food. It's in the foods that we consider healthy. It's in everyday kids' snacks like popcorn, mac and cheese, fruit snacks. It's in sports drinks like Gatorade and so-called vitamin water. It's even added to chicken broth, to corn, to pickles, to mustard, and to yogurt. And so, of course, our kids get sick. And we lovingly feed them chewable vitamins which have, surprise, tartrazine. And so the cycle continues until the coughs and asthma kick in, at which point you go to pick up some cough syrup. And yeah, you guessed it, tartrazine. I've been picking on tartrazine today, but that's just one of at least 100 chemical poisons that our health agencies allow into our children's food. I can make a video just like this to talk about Red 40, BHA, BHD, potassium bromate, chemical after chemical, and on and on and on. If just one of them can cause all of these problems, imagine what they're doing in combination. That's never been studied. If we took all of these chemicals out, our nation would get healthier immediately. We'd have fewer sick days. We'd have better focus. We'd have less anxiety. Our kids would learn more easily. We'd lose weight. We'd have more energy. We'd have fewer tumors and longer lives. It's not all dark. Over the past 16 years, the government has banned 8 chemical additives that cause cancer, genetic damage, asthma, and many of the other self-conditions as tartrazine does. And you know what's interesting? All 8 of those crucial steps forward in our kids' health were taken under President Trump. But the Democrats who claim to be all about health care have stood by watching other countries ban these poisons and make our kids sick, asthmatic, hyperactive, and depressed. They left them on every supermarket shelf in America. They even used your tax money to put them in your kids' school lunch. So their big food and their big ag donors probably gave them all that golden handshake and the big money hug. And their big pharma donors probably called them up and thanked them also, because now they're going to make billions selling Adderall, Prozac, and rescue inhalers. Enough is enough. President Trump and I are going to stop the mass poisoning of American children. Together, we're going to make America healthy again.
Wow, they really are a force to be reckoned with, aren't they? So they identified 6 dyes to be eliminated. And we covered all of this in episode 2. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, go back and watch episode 2 because we go in depth. So the 6 identified dyes are red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6, blue 1, blue 2, and green 3, all by the end of 2026. Let's hear from Marty McCary.
Today, the FDA is taking action to remove petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply and from medications. For the last 50 years, American children have increasingly been living in a toxic soup of synthetic chemicals. The scientific community has conducted a number of studies raising concerns about the correlation between petroleum-based synthetic dyes and several health conditions, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obesity, diabetes, insulin resistance, cancer, genomic disruption, GI issues, as I've seen in the hospital, and allergic reactions. For example, this Lancet study conducted a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study on food dyes and concluded that artificial colors in the diet, quote, result in increased hyperactivity. So why are we taking a gamble? Parents, moms and dads, have also tried to raise attention to the issue. Some parents have observed that these chemicals cause hyperactivity and even aggressive behavior, and that it subsides when the chemicals are removed from the diet of the child, and sometimes even reoccurs when those petroleum-based chemical dyes are reintroduced. As I know from my experience taking care of children as a doctor, you have to always listen to the mom. Other studies have found that artificial colors that create vibrant colors mess with the child's developing brain to make ultra-processed foods more attractive, even when the child already feels full. These studies have associated food colors directly with obesity and diabetes. Well, America's children are sick and suffering. 41% of children have at least one health condition, and 1 in 5 are on medication. The answer is not more Ozempic, more ADHD medication, and more antidepressants. There's a role for those medications, but we have to look at underlying root causes. The F in FDA stands for food. Now, there's no one ingredient that accounts for the child chronic disease epidemic. And let's be honest, taking petroleum-based food dyes out of the food supply is not a silver bullet that will instantly make America's children healthy, but it is one important step. This administration is not interested in continuing down the path of doing the same old things as we watch our nation's children get sicker. We need fresh, new approaches. Cancer and diabetes in young people is going up at an alarming rate, and nobody seems to know why. We have to turn our attention to underlying causes, such as chemicals and toxins that children are exposed to, not just more insulin and chemotherapy. And let's not forget that the best way to lower drug prices is to stop taking drugs we don't need. 30 states concerned about this very issue have introduced bills or laws with a patchwork of standards for food companies. So the food industry, which has many good people, has asked for clarity. So today, the FDA is taking the following steps. Number one, establishing a national standard and timeline for the food industry to transition from petroleum-based food dyes to natural alternatives. Number two, initiating a process to revoke authorization of synthetic food colorings, including those not in production, namely citrus red number 2 and orange B, within the coming weeks. Number three, taking steps to eliminate the remaining 6 synthetic dyes on the market from the U.S. food supply, specifically red dye number 40, yellow dye number 5, yellow dye number 6, blue dye number 1, blue dye number 2, and green dye number 3 by the end of next year.
So as we move into our topic tonight, I think it's important to begin to understand what happened to us all during COVID.
From basically European intellectual inquiry into what the heck happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s. You know, very intelligent, highly educated population, and they went barking mad. And how did that happen? The answer is mass formation psychosis. When you have a society that has become decoupled from each other and has free-floating anxiety and a sense that things don't make sense, we can't understand it, and then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis, they literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere. And one of the aspects of that phenomena is the people that they identify as their leaders, the ones typically that come in and say, you have this pain and I can solve it for you. I and I alone, okay, can fix this problem for you. Okay, then they will follow that person through. It doesn't matter whether they lie to him or whatever. The data are irrelevant. And furthermore, anybody who questions that narrative is to be immediately attacked. They are the other. This is central to mass formation psychosis. And this is what has happened. We had all those conditions. If you remember back before 2019, everybody was complaining, the world doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. And we're all isolated from each other. We're all on our little tools. We're not connected socially anymore, except through social media. And then this thing happened and everybody focused on it. That is how mass formation psychosis happens. And that is what's happened here.
Mass formation psychosis. Let's hear from Dr. David Martin.
We should have recognized that when treatment was being suppressed, and by the way, not hypothetical treatment, published treatment, when that was being suppressed, we should have gone, hold on a minute, sounds like there's a racket here. Somebody's suppressing real treatment options, and they're suppressing it so that they can justify an emergency medical countermeasure that can only be authorized if there are no treatment options. How funny is it that Johns Hopkins University, that's right, named for Johns Hopkins, the guy who actually popularized hydroxychloroquine for the treatment of malaria. How ironic is it that the very institution funded by the Rockefeller Foundation to celebrate Johns Hopkins, how ironic is it that Johns Hopkins University was able to turn on its own namesake and say hydroxychloroquine is dangerous? The school has its name because hydroxychloroquine is safe. That's why it has its name. The CDC used to be, before it became the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the U.S. Malaria Suppression Program in Atlanta, Georgia, which did what? Advocate for the distribution of hydroxychloroquine. This is one of those things where you sit back and you go, the audacity of the crime is what's surprising. Not the existence or absence of a disease or the existence or the absence of a pathogen. The thing that's shocking, truly shocking, is how audacious the criminals are and how blind the public is to reading the information that is right in front of their face in preference to trying to find a motivation for how bad people in government could possibly do anything as bad as what I've just described. So I think there's a lot of problems in terms of how we have been conditioned to take on information. And I think that as a society, we have been conditioned to accept a fear-based narrative without question. You'll recall, as I will, and I'm dating myself, but you'll recall when we were told that we should crawl under school desks in elementary school and hide under our desks in the event of a nuclear attack from Russia. Now, you'll remember those desks. They had a wooden top, they had a little metal casement, and then 4 metal stands. And somehow as children, we were conditioned to say that in the event of a nuclear blast, we were going to somehow be saved under our desks. Really? Does anybody know anything about radiation? Does anybody know anything about how nuclear weapons work? Because hiding under a desk merely means that your corpse is preserved, so when the Pompeii diggers come back to dig you up, they'll find nice little encapsulated children huddled under melted metal desks. It'll be phenomenal, and it'll be great for a museum somewhere. What a nonsensical thing to do. But why did that practice become ubiquitous across the country? It was to instill fear, allows you to respond to an authoritative impulse. And I can guarantee you, every single person who is a parent over the age of 40 knows that they were conditioned to accept, be afraid, set any logic aside, and if the authority tells you to do it in fear, do it. And by the way, if you were like me, being a little smartass, because I was in elementary school, when you pointed out how stupid that was, you know what you got? Sent to the principal's office. See, this programming has been around for a long time, and we pretend like it's, oh my gosh, how did this happen in 2019? No, come on. We have been habituated into the belief that if the people in authority who architect the fear tell you A, to be afraid, and then B, what to do when you're afraid, then you do it. And if we as a society stopped living in the fear narrative, the signal couldn't transmit.
So here, we're not living in the fear narrative. No. When we're afraid, we can't critically think. And so we are going to counter their deceptive fear narratives with information and truth so that we can critically think through the information being presented to us. So, before we begin, tonight's dose of deception, the hydroxychloroquine hypocrisy, I'm going to reiterate that I am not an expert. I'm a nurse who is seeking truth and sharing my journey with you. This was the most difficult episode so far that I've done. There's just so much information. Here's just a few of the studies that I was poring over in preparation for tonight's episode. I'd also like to cite The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and also The Courage to Face COVID-19 by Dr. Peter McCullough. So I've done my very best to try to condense and format the information without cutting out what I believe to be impactful. Again, this has been very challenging. So this may be lengthy, but it's vital that we understand every bit of this because the totality of the deception is immense. So let's take a look. We're going to do a little review to lay the groundwork. So infection begins when a pathogen enters your body. It enters the cell and starts to multiply. So it's basically the presence of a pathogen. That's infection. Then we enter into the prodromal phase, really important phase. It's the early phase. The virus starts replicating. We experience mild initial symptoms, headache, some muscle aching, low-grade fever, that I feel like I'm coming down with something feeling. I've heard a lot of people describe it as, I thought I was coming down with a sinus infection. The prodromal phase, and that's prodromal, prodromal, usually lasts 1 to 3 days. So that 72-hour window becomes very important. We'll talk about it. Then we progress to illness. So now the virus has been replicating, the viral load is now high, and you have increased contagiousness. Infection now has noticeable symptoms. For respiratory illnesses, it's usually congestion, sore throat, runny nose, cough, fever. What I can tell you is that masks and X's taped on the floor and 6 feet distancing and that, super special plexiglass does not prevent infection. But we can arrest the viral replication that occurs during the prodromal phase and prevent illness. So prior to COVID, most of us had never heard of a PCR test. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction, and it's used to detect the presence of a virus by amplifying tiny amounts of their genetic material. If the virus is present, the amplified genetic material will show up in the test, confirming infection. So Dr. Kary Mullisk was the creator of the PCR test, and he said, anyone can test positive for practically anything with a PCR test. If you run it long enough, with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It really doesn't tell you that you're sick. So it's the cycle threshold, the number of amplification cycles needed to detect the genetic material of a virus in the sample. So a low cycle threshold is between 15 and 20 cycles. Well, what does that mean, BB? You get the stupid swab in your nose and they put it in the solution and they put it in the machine and they start running the amplification cycles until they detect the genetic material of the virus they're looking for, COVID. So if they detect it after only running 15 to 20 cycles, it indicates that there's a lot of viral material and it's detected quickly, suggesting a higher viral load. And remember, the higher the viral load, the more symptoms that are present and the more contagious you are. A high cycle threshold, 35 to 40 cycles, means they did the test, they put it in a solution, and they start running the amplification cycles. And they're looking for the genetic material of the virus they're looking for, like COVID. So they're running it and they're running it and they haven't found it yet. So they keep running it and they keep running it and they get up to a cycle threshold of 35 to 40. That indicates very little viral material. It takes more cycles to detect. It could indicate a low viral load or even non-infectious remnants. So a previous infection from another coronavirus, like those causing the common cold, could be detected at high cycle thresholds. Cycle threshold varied for COVID-19 testing. In the US, labs followed the CDC guidelines, a cycle threshold cutoff of 40. So that means they could run it and run it and run it and run it. And at 30, there's no virus. And at 35, there's no virus. If they got all the way up to 40 and there was no virus detected, you were negative. The CDC's internal protocols acknowledge that a cycle threshold value of greater than 33 detected non-viable virus. So how would that be positive for COVID? Studies suggest that cycle threshold values below 25 indicate high viral load and likely infectious. Cycle threshold values above 33 to 35 were less likely to contain viable virus. So let's hear some more from Kary Mullisk.
PCR is separate from that. It's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what
also,
it is. But it's not. It doesn't tell you that you're sick. If they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. Because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. PCR has been misused. It's like it allows you to take a very minuscule amount of anything and make it measurable and then talk about it in meetings and stuff like it is important.
Got to be somebody that knows this. You go to experts and ask them. And so I asked all these people one after the other, and none of them had it. None of them. And I was getting really freaked about that. That's when I first started saying, they don't know. Nobody really knows. This whole thing is a big sham.
This whole thing is a big sham.
These guys like Fauci get up there and start talking, he doesn't know anything really about anything. And I'd say that to his face. Nothing. The man thinks you can take a blood sample and stick it in an electron microscope, and if it's got a virus in there, you'll know it. He doesn't understand electron microscopy, and he doesn't understand medicine. He should not be in a position like he's in. Most of those guys up there on the top are just total administrative people, and they don't know anything about what's going on the bottom. Those guys have got an agenda, which is not what we would like them to have, being that we pay for them to take care of our health in some way. They've got a personal kind of agenda. They make up their own rules as they go. They change them when they want to. And they smugly, like Tony Fauci, does not mind going on television in front of the people that pay his salary and lie directly into the camera.
So do you remember Dr. Fauci talking about asymptomatic cases? So how many of those were simply high cycle threshold positives? If you're asymptomatic, what's your viral load? Are you contagious? Do you require quarantine? Were you going to kill grandma? And how many asymptomatic cases were actually healthy people with a functioning immune system? So a healthy person who is infected with COVID and their immune system abruptly stops the viral replication during that prodromal phase, and they get better without progressing to an illness, but yet they're required to get a COVID test like I was. I was required to get one weekly because I wouldn't take the COVID vaccine. So how many healthy people had high cycle threshold tests where they were picking up the COVID virus that their immune system had successfully destroyed? Let's review repurposed drugs because this becomes important in our discussion. Let's hear from Dr. Kelly Victory.
What I wanted to talk about and what I want people to understand before we get into the weeds specifically on, the IVM or HCQ or any of the other drugs, and including the ones, steroids, is to talk about the concept of repurposed drugs. The idea of taking a medication that has been FDA approved for, used as, for whatever, and using it for something else is something that is a cornerstone of medicine. Research shows that somewhere between 25 and 30% of all medications are written for something for which they were not originally designed. Once a medication is FDA approved, it means that it is safe for use in humans. Full stop. It doesn't say it used for humans for this indication. It's just safe for use in humans. We have anti-seizure drugs that are used for chronic pain. We have hypertension drugs that are used for migraine headaches. We have chemotherapy drugs that are used for skin conditions, and on and on. Once a drug is FDA approved, if it is safe for use for intestinal parasites, it doesn't become unsafe if you take it for COVID. If a drug is safe for use for malaria or lupus, it doesn't become unsafe if you then prescribe it and take it for COVID. So this idea of repurposed drugs, and you already intimated, you said, you see these COVID patients, it's a brand new virus. People are having inflammation. I've got a great idea. Let's use anti-inflammatories, steroids. People are having clotting issues. I got a great idea. Let's use anti-clotting drugs. So it wasn't like we were just pulling these things, out of thin air.
So from the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, from the outset, hydroxychloroquine and other therapeutics posed an existential threat to the $48 billion COVID vaccine project, and particularly to Gates and Fauci's vanity drug, remdesivir, also known as Veklury. Side note, I have an advance directive, and in my advance directive, I specifically decline consent for remdesivir or Veklury to be administered. Just a side note. So if any approved drug like hydroxychloroquine proved effective against COVID, pharmaceutical companies would no longer be legally allowed to fast-track their vaccines to market under an emergency use authorization. Instead, the vaccines would have to endure years of methodical safety and efficacy testing, and that would mean less profit. Dr. Fauci's agency is co-owner of the patent and stands to collect a fortune in royalties. So Dr. Simone Gold on X posted this. FDA approved since 1955, hydroxychloroquine is safe, effective, and has been widely used for decades. But in 2020, it was suddenly labeled dangerous. Why? Because emergency use authorization, the EUA, for the vaccine required that no alternative treatment exist. Big Pharma needed hydroxychloroquine gone. The truth is undeniable. A CDC study published in 2005 in the Virology Journal, chloroquine is a potent inhibitor of SARS coronavirus infection and spread. So this study demonstrated that chloroquine quickly eliminated coronavirus in primate cell cultures during the first SARS outbreak. Remember, this was in 2005. The study concluded that chloroquine had strong antiviral effects on SARS infection, both before and after exposure. So it was suggesting that it was effective with prophylaxis, which is prevention, and therapeutic advantage. Common sense would presume it would be also effective against other coronaviruses, like SARS-2, also known as COVID-19. Hydroxychloroquine, like chloroquine, is an analog of the quinine found in the bark of the cinchona tree that George Washington used to protect troops from malaria. Hydroxychloroquine has an additional hydroxyl group, making it less toxic than chloroquine. Most African countries have it over the counter, and they call it Sunday because millions take it weekly for malaria prevention. Prior to COVID, it was over the counter in France, Canada, Iran, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Panama as well. It is the #1 most used drug in India, the second most populous nation on the planet. In the US, the FDA has approved hydroxychloroquine without limitation for 65 years, and physicians could use it for any off-label use. The CDC's information sheet deems hydroxychloroquine safe for pregnant women, breastfeeding women, children, infants, elderly, and the immunocompromised. So let's hear a little bit more from Dr. Simone Gold.
Drugs become over-the-counter when the USA manufacturer tries to move it to the over-the-counter category. They petition the FDA to do that. So that's happened a lot. Like the drug Motrin went over-the-counter for that reason. Minoxidil for hair loss, nicotine patches. There's, Zantac, Pepcid, Antivert, Meclizine. There's tons and tons of examples. But that request to go over-the-counter is triggered by the drug manufacturer in response to consumer demand. There hasn't been consumer demand for this drug, right? We don't have a lot of malaria in this country. The only uses for hydroxychloroquine historically have been for lupus and for rheumatoid arthritis. So nobody was begging for this drug. Now all of a sudden people are begging for it. And so we just want to get it over the counter. It is over the counter in most of the world. It's actually sold in the vitamin section of pharmacies over the counter in much of the world. For example, Indonesia. For example, Iran. For example, most of Latin America. It's sold in Africa. It's widely available. People carry it in their pocket like we carry Tylenol. We just didn't have that kind of demand, so it's not over the counter. It's certainly not over the counter because it's not safe. It's much safer than Tylenol, aspirin, and Motrin. That would be very shocking for your listeners to hear. What I want your listeners to process is, why are we talking about an FDA-approved medication at all? Why does anybody but a doctor and patient have an opinion on this subject?
So 15 days to slow the spread was announced on March the 16th, 2020. Dr. Vladimir Zev-Zelenko, a general doctor in New York, where 35,000 people live in 1 square mile, said the standard protocol has been doctors telling patients to go home, drink fluids, and take Tylenol. And then if it gets bad, go to the hospital, get intubated, and you have a 50% chance or more of dying. Dr. Zelenko divided his patients into high risk, those over 60 with symptoms, or anyone sick with chronic medical problems like cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, or anyone who was having trouble breathing. And he initiated treatment. At that time, it was taking 72 hours for COVID results. Remember that 72-hour prodromal phase? Quoting Dr. Zelenko, quote, "Those are the crucial 72 hours. If we can intervene early, we can reduce the viral load in such a way so that the person's immune system could actually clear the infection without the development of acute respiratory distress syndrome or pneumonia," end quote. So zinc is known to inhibit viral replication, as it inhibits an enzyme that allows the virus to reproduce. Hydroxychloroquine opens the door and lets zinc in. It's a zinc ionophore. Azithromycin is needed because when the lungs are damaged by the viral infection, they become susceptible to secondary bacterial pneumonia. In fact, in 2008, Dr. Fauci et al., which just means the other guys, published in the Journal of Infectious Disease a study titled "Predominant Role of Bacterial Pneumonia as a Cause of Death in Pandemic Influenza." Bacterial pneumonia as a cause of death in pandemic flu? Implications for pandemic influenza preparedness. So they examined lung tissue from 58 autopsies from the 1918 Spanish flu, and the samples consistently implicated bacterial pneumonia as the cause of death, not the flu virus. Their conclusion: if severe pandemic flu, which, by the way, is a single-strand RNA virus, more on that later, if the pandemic flu is a problem of viral bacterial copathogenesis, which just means simply it's a virus and a bacteria that's causing the disease, then pandemic planning must include the treatment of pneumonia. Bacterial, that would be antibiotics, as well as the nation stockpiling antibiotics. Speaking of bacterial viral copathogenesis, do you guys remember this? Let me find this from episode 2, I believe. Maybe it was further on. Anyway, previous episode. This is the Blue Cross. Let me make this bigger. This is the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan 2024 Provider Incentive Program. And if you look closely at this, providers were bonused $50 for avoidance of antibiotic treatment for acute bronchitis. Wait a minute. We just read Dr. Fauci's study from 2008, where they identified secondary bacterial pneumonia and that it was important that we treat the pneumonia. And yet Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan is paying doctors a $50 bonus for not prescribing an antibiotic to someone with acute bronchitis. What in the hell is actually going on? Anyway, so Dr. Zelenko was treating his patients early with hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and azithromycin, and he was seeing amazing results. On March 21st, he posted a video addressing President Trump, claiming his success rate. He followed up with a letter to President Trump. On March 24th, the White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, reached out to Dr. Zelenko for more information. So let's take a look at President.
A lot of good things have come out about the hydroxy. A lot of good things have come out. And you'd be surprised at how many people are taking it, especially the frontline workers, before you catch it. The frontline workers, many are taking it. I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine. Right now, yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I started taking it. Because I think it's good. I've heard a lot of good stories. And if it's not good, I'll tell you right, I'm not going to get hurt by it. It's been around for 40 years for malaria, for lupus, for other things. I take it. Frontline workers take it. A lot of doctors take it. A lot of doctors take it. I take it. Now, I hope to not be able to take it soon because, I hope they come up with some answer. But I think people should be allowed to. I got a letter from a doctor the other day from Westchester, New York, around the area. He didn't want anything. He just said, sir, I have hundreds of patients, and I give them hydroxychloroquine. I give them the Z-Pak, which is zithromycin, and I give them zinc. And out of the hundreds of patients, many hundreds, over 300 patients, I haven't lost one. He said, please keep pressing that, sir. And if you look at that phony report that was put in, that report on the hydroxy was given to people that were in extraordinarily bad condition. Extraordinarily bad. People that were dying. No, I think for whatever it's worth, I take it. I would have told you that 3-4 days ago, but we never had a chance because you never asked me the question.
Did the White House doctor recommend that you take that? Is that why you're taking it?
Yeah, White House doctor. I didn't recommend. No, I asked him, what do you think? He said, well, if you'd like it. I said, yeah, I'd like it. I'd like to take it. A lot of people are taking it. A lot of frontline workers are taking hydroxychloroquine. I don't take it because, hey, people said, oh, maybe he owns the company. No, I don't own the company. You know what? I want the people of this nation to feel good. I don't want them being sick. And there's a very good chance that this has an impact, especially early on. But you look at frontline workers, you look at doctors and nurses, a lot of them are taking it as a preventative. And they're taking, totally unrelated, but they take the Z-Pak or the zithromycin for possible infection. Now, I haven't taken that other than an original dose because all you need, you don't have to take it simultaneously. But the zinc you do take. So I'm taking the two, the zinc and the hydroxy. And all I can tell you is, so far, I seem to be okay.
Can you explain, sir, though, why you started taking it? Have you been exposed?
Yeah, because, no, not at all. I just said that I've had so many letters from people, like the one I told you about. I got it last week. I'll give you, would you like a copy of it? I'd love to give you, if you ask Molly, she'll give you a copy of it. But this is a doctor, he doesn't want anything. I don't know him, never heard of him. But he treats people that we're talking about. And he said out of hundreds of people that he's treated, he hasn't lost one. And he just wanted me to know about it. That's all. He wasn't saying, gee, could I have dinner with you, Mr. President? I'd like to come to the White House. But I've received many such letters. I've received a lot of positive letters. And it seems to have an impact. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if it doesn't, you're not going to get sick or die. This is a pill that's been used for a long time, for 30, 40 years on the malaria and on lupus too, and even on arthritis, I guess, from what I understand. So it's been heavily tested in terms of, I was just waiting to see your eyes light up when I said this, but when I announce this. But yeah, I've taken it for about a week and a half now, and I'm still here.
So on March 23rd of 2020, the illustrious Governor Cuomo of New York issued an executive order limiting hydroxychloroquine prescriptions to malaria, lupus, and rheumatoid arthritis, or in state-approved clinical trials, or in inpatient and acute care settings. So this essentially wiped out treating early on an outpatient basis. So Dr. Zelenko had to improvise and research, just like we can do. In 2014, the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry identified quercetin. We covered this on episode 5. Quercetin is a plant-derived flavonoid. It acts as a zinc ionophore, just like hydroxychloroquine. It helps the zinc get into the cell to stop that viral replication. Quercetin was widely available, safe, and it did not require a prescription. So again, in March, we were stuck at home, panicked by the death counters on our screens, wiping down our groceries, and being brainwashed by mass formation psychosis. And that's when I woke up. And somehow, by divine intervention, I discovered Dr. Zelenko. So I began researching what he was reporting. And as my awakening continued, the grip of mass formation psychosis began to slip. The doctor from New York, that little doctor from New York, changed my life. And he set me on a trajectory that has me here with you tonight. I am so eternally grateful to Dr. Zelenko. Let's hear from him.
Hello, President Trump. My name is Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, and I'm a board-certified family practitioner in Orange County, New York. What I'm suggesting, which has not been yet suggested, and that's why I'm making this video, is that we should initiate treatment in moderate to high-risk patients and in the early stages of the infection in the outpatient setting. I'm seeing tremendous positive results. I have not sent any patient to the hospital yet, even though I've treated hundreds already with infection.
Now, hydroxychloroquine has been FDA approved for 65 years for the treatment of malaria, for malaria prophylaxis, the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, and lupus. We give it to pregnant women, we give it to nursing mothers, we give it to children. Some people live at 400 milligrams a day for 50 years on it. WHO considers it one of the most essential medications. I call that the World Homicide Organization. And the United States stockpiles hydroxychloroquine. It's considered one of the safest medications in the world. So why was Cuomo blocked? When the president promoted hydroxychloroquine, I saw myself how she got in front of him on the microphone and contradicted the president of the United States. Which is interesting because in 2005, there was a CDC paper published by CDC that said that chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine has anti-SARS properties on the level of being considered a vaccine. And all of a sudden, Governor Cuomo issues an executive order that only in the context of COVID-19, pharmacists could not dispense this medication. And my patients started dying again. Can you imagine? And so, the Marines have a saying, improvise, adapt, overcome. So what do you go to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you have. So they took away hydroxychloroquine, so I needed to find another substitute that would deliver zinc into the cell. So on the NIH server of all places, I'm looking and I find a substance called quercetin together with vitamin C that does the same thing as hydroxychloroquine. Now, to be honest, I didn't know what quercetin was. So I Google it and I see it's a derivative of onions and apple peels. But more importantly, it's over the counter. And so I leaned back and I said, oh my God, I just found the cure to tyranny. 3.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with pulmonary artery sarcoma, which is the deadliest cancer in the world. It's only around 10 cases a year, all found at autopsy. When someone is at this state in their life, they don't care about money, they don't care about power, they don't care about fame. Your value structure changes, and you start to focus and concentrate on what's really important in life. Family, country, humanity, compassion, kindness. I have 8 children, and I want to leave the world a little bit better and safer for them, and for your children, and for all of our children. You know, what's the difference if I live 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? In relation to the infinite, it's all insignificant. But the beauty of finite existence is that we have consciousness, and we have free choice. And God gives us the ability to make certain choices so that we can develop a relationship with the eternal, with the infinite. This is a war against God consciousness. And that's why all totalitarian psychopaths, first thing they want to do is remove or suppress religion or houses of worship. And the reason is simple. If I bow down to God, I don't bow down to them. The freedom of our children is dependent on what we do right now. So here's the solution. Civil disobedience. Just say no. Just resist. No one at this point is holding you down and putting a needle into your arm. And if they try, we have 450 million guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens, which is a right that the founders, I believe the Constitution is a divinely inspired document. And the Second Amendment is not to protect me from you, but to protect us from a tyrannical government. We should have the resolve, the stamina, the courage, and the ability to deal with the uncertainty and the fear, which only comes through a mature faith in our Creator, because anxiety lives where God consciousness is absent. So we have to fill ourselves with the Spirit of God and use that and rely on Him. Happy birthday, He just made all of us. You know, it's a dynamic process of recreation, and rely on Him, and that will give us the fortitude to be the David that slays this Goliath.
So a couple of things that Dr. Zelenko taught me. Just say no. And I was the only one where I worked who said no. I did not get that vaccine. I will not get that vaccine. I said no. He also said we improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that is a mantra in my life today. He said we all have a role to play to make this world safer for our children and our grandchildren. And it starts right here with what we're doing. It starts with exposing the deception, countering it with truth, and then sharing it with others so they can be empowered too. And then finally, anxiety lives where God consciousness is absent. Rest in peace, Dr. Zelenko. So at the request of Health and Human Services, several large pharmaceutical companies, Novartis, Bayer, Sanofi, and others, donated their inventory, a total of 63 million doses of hydroxychloroquine and 2 million doses of chloroquine, to the Strategic National Stockpile. That's managed by BARDA, B-A-R-D-A, an agency under the HHS Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. BARDA's director, Dr. Rick Bright, later claimed that the drugs were dangerous and he needed to protect the public from them. Bright colluded with the FDA to restrict the use of the donated pills to hospitalized patients only. So the FDA issued an emergency use authorization on March 28, 2020. An EUA for a drug that was already approved by the FDA for off-label use. You heard Dr. Kelly Victory talk about it. The hydroxychloroquine EUA restricted it to hospitalized patients only and used language that led most physicians to believe prescribing was off limits. In March of 2020, at a press conference, Fauci stated about hydroxychloroquine, quote, "The evidence that you're talking about is anecdotal evidence." Let's hear from the little gnome himself.
Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. You know, it's essentially what I said multiple times from this podium, is that when you have, first of all, we're trying to develop de novo drugs that are not yet out there, not approved, that ultimately would be effective. And the way you prove that is to do a randomized controlled trial to prove safety and efficacy. I'm not totally sure what the president was referring to, but I believe he's referring to a report that used both hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin together to have some possibility of being in effect. Many of the things that you hear out there are what I had called anecdotal reports. They may be true, but they're anecdotal. So the only thing that I was saying is that if you really want to definitively know if something works, that you've got to do the kind of trial that you get the good information. The president is talking about hope for people, and it's not an unreasonable thing to hope for people. So when you have approved drugs that physicians have the option in a decision between the physician and the patient, are you going to use a drug that someone says from an anecdotal standpoint, not completely proven, but might have some effect? There are those who lean to the point of giving hope and saying, give that person the option of having access to that drug. And then you have the other group, which is my job as a scientist, to say my job is to ultimately prove, without a doubt, that a drug is not only safe, but that it actually works. Those two things are really not incompatible when you think about that, particularly when you're in an arena where you don't have anything that's proven. We went through the same sort of thing with a little bit of a different twist during the HIV/AIDS epidemic until we finally developed drugs that were absolutely knockout drugs that were safe and that were effective. But in the beginning, there was that tension about that. So you really got to have a balance. I've got to do my job as a scientist, and others have other things to do.
You know, the fact that he stood up there and actually was bragging about how he handled the HIV/AIDS crisis is mind-boggling to me. Do a little research on that. Maybe we'll do that together. So anecdotal evidence is simply a story based on personal experience. He negated it because it wasn't based on scientific evidence through clinical trials. We were in the middle of a pandemic and still in lockdown. And the drug, hydroxychloroquine, was already approved and off patent. Exactly who was going to put up the money and invest the time to do clinical trials when there would be zero profit? Answer that, Dr. Fauci. So let's do a pause and just a little review, okay?
Hydroxychloroquine has been a safe and effective medication throughout the world for 65 years. It was developed from tree bark and then turned into quinine, which was used by the British in India to protect against malaria infections. Today, the synthetic form, which is hydroxychloroquine, is used throughout the world. It is actually a WHO-mandated necessary medication to prevent against malaria pandemics. And it's been used in the United States for lupus and rheumatoid arthritis on a daily basis for decades in patients who take it every single day. Women, children, pregnant women, nursing mothers, and elderly adults. Even now in Africa, it's considered to be a supplement and sold over the counter in many countries safely and effectively. Until this year, hydroxychloroquine was considered to be safe for all people. It was only after January of 2020 that hydroxychloroquine became the devil.
What do you think? Who's pushing against hydroxychloroquine? Who's behind it?
Well, I think there's a coalition of forces that are behind the push against hydroxychloroquine. It started in January when Gilead Pharmaceuticals announced some benefit to a patented drug called remdesivir that reduced hospital stay course for those with coronavirus by 3 or 4 days. Certainly meaningful, but certainly not curative. As soon as that happened, media, politicians, other special interest groups got on board with trying to stop hydroxychloroquine from being made available by doctors to their patients. And a whole campaign was set against it, including several research publications like The Lancet back in June that published fraudulent data that was later retracted to say that hydroxychloroquine either didn't work or it killed people. My belief at this point is that it's all about the election. And there are people now in positions of power, politicians primarily, who will benefit from keeping America scared and stuck at home through November. And if all Americans had access to hydroxychloroquine, the pandemic would essentially end in about 30 days. And if that happens, a lot of people will lose.
So Dr. Fauci, Bill Gates, and the World Health Organization financed a cadre of research mercenaries to concoct a series of 20 studies, all employing fraudulent protocols to discredit hydroxychloroquine. Instead of using the standard treatment of 400 milligrams per day, the 17 World Health Organization studies administered a borderline lethal dose starting at 2,400 milligrams a day on day one and 800 milligrams a day thereafter. This was used to prove hydroxychloroquine was dangerous. Sure enough, it proved that elderly patients can die from deadly overdoses. Were the patients or their families aware of these lethal doses? Did they give informed consent? In the Journal of the American Medical Association, Brazilian researchers used a dose of 1,200 milligrams a day of chloroquine for up to 10 days. Predictably, 39% of them died, and the mean age was 55. They reported that the EKG changes were characteristic of chloroquine toxicity. Keep in mind that COVID patients in the hospital were suffering from severe illness. Their oxygen levels were low. Many were on ventilators for respiratory support, receiving no nutrition, only IV fluid. So they had electrolyte imbalances, which can affect drug clearance by the kidneys. And they were given lethal doses. So I have a personal story about chloroquine's cardiac toxicity. I was a fairly new nurse. I'm not even sure if I had finished school yet. And it was a Saturday. I was working on a Saturday, and we got a call that EMS was bringing in a non-responsive young woman from an urgent care center. So the story is her boyfriend found her that morning unresponsive and took her to urgent care. Urgent care then immediately called 911, and they came to us. And this girl was completely obtunded. I mean, she wasn't responding to painful stimuli, verbal stimuli, nothing. We did a complete workup on her. We looked for, every tox screen in the world we ran. We CT'd her head. We were looking for anything and everything and could not identify why this young woman was so obtunded. So we told the boyfriend, go back home and look for anything out of the ordinary, anything that can explain why she's in the condition she's in. He came back about 45 minutes later, and what he had in his hand was an empty mason jar, the glass mason jars. It was empty, but it had a white film all inside the jar. He said, my chloroquine is missing. He had recently traveled to Africa to visit with family and was taking chloroquine as a malaria preventative. Well, his girlfriend took his entire stash of chloroquine, dissolved it in water in that mason jar, and drank it. So once we knew what our potential causative agent was, chloroquine, we called poison control. And it's the only time in my entire career I have ever heard poison control say this. Basically, they said that the time frame between when she ingested and where we were at that moment was too long for us to be able to intervene and have any success. The fact that she had dissolved it and then drank it increased how rapidly it was absorbed. They described that she would go through multiple cardiac arrhythmias as a result of the cardiac toxicity, and that none of our advanced life support measures, drugs, electrical shock therapy, none of those measures were going to be successful, and that she was going to die from chloroquine toxicity. So it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And when you give people lethal doses, they're going to have EKG changes. They're going to have cardiac problems, and they're going to die at lethal doses. So in May of 2020, The Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine published overtly fraudulent studies from data obtained from the Surgisphere Corporation, an obscure Illinois-based company founded in 2008. It had 11 employees, including a science fiction writer and a porn star. I'm not kidding. This is cited in RFK's book, and he has yet to be sued for defamation for anything that he wrote in this book after it has been published. So Surgisphere claimed to have analyzed data from 6 continents and hundreds of hospitals treating patients with chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. The Lancet portrayed hydroxychloroquine as ineffective and dangerous. Based on this study, the FDA revoked the emergency use authorization for hydroxychloroquine on June 15th of 2020. But then over 200 scientists evaluated this study. To cite one of the data discrepancies in this study, the number of deaths among patients taking hydroxychloroquine in just one Australian hospital exceeded the total number of deaths for the entire country. So shortly thereafter, after all these scientists debunked this study, Surgisphere just vanished from the internet. Both The Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine withdrew their studies in shame. The global scientific community was in shock. The Lancet had made one of the biggest retractions in modern history. So let's hear from Dr. Peter McCullough.
For the hearing? Let me just say, before I answer that this is not just a government culpability and malfeasance with respect to hydroxychloroquine. This is academic malfeasance. There were 2 fraudulent papers, one in the New England Journal of Medicine, one in Lancet, published by individuals interested in doing evil to the world with respect to a beneficial treatment of hydroxychloroquine. In an unprecedented manner, these 2 manuscripts were withdrawn after 2 weeks where they could scare the public and the world's physician audience. Since that time, there have been dozens of fraudulent papers.
Re-emphasize that. They were then withdrawn.
They were withdrawn, and the New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet acknowledged that they were fraudulent papers. They were scare papers to scare people on hydroxychloroquine. Since that time, there's been dozens of pile-on scare tactics in academics. This isn't the government. This is people in my field, in academic medicine, who are committing academic fraud. I reviewed a paper. I'm a cardiologist. I reviewed a paper that made it into the medical literature demonstrating that hydroxychloroquine causes a heart attack, that hydroxychloroquine causes a giant scar in the heart. And I can tell you, I'm at Baylor in Dallas. We have the world's most recognized cardiac pathology program in the world. Our senior examiner has held in his hands, more human hearts than anybody in the history of mankind. I can tell you firsthand, hydroxychloroquine does not cause giant scars in the heart. So academic medicine is committing a fraud, is committing, I think, a crime against humanity. There must be a motivation behind this that's much bigger than just Democrat versus Republican. I am extremely concerned, honestly, about the academic contribution to scare tactics in the world. Now, it's not working everywhere. In India, it's given first line. In India is such a crowded country. I've been there myself. Their deaths per million population.
So that video kind of cut out at the end. My apologies. In that same month, Dr. Harvey Risch, a Yale epidemiologist, published the most comprehensive study to date on hydroxychloroquine's efficacy against COVID. He titled it quite urgently. This is an out-of-the-ordinary title for a study. Early outpatient treatment of symptomatic high-risk COVID-19 patients that should be ramped up immediately as a key to pandemic crisis. He specifically pointed out that faulty protocols, most of which showed that hydroxychloroquine was not effective, were given without zinc and without azithromycin. Well, we understand this now because hydroxychloroquine is the zinc ionophore. Hydroxychloroquine is what opens the door, pulls the zinc into the cell, and it's the zinc. The zinc is the key. It's the zinc that stops the virus from replicating. And then the azithromycin addresses the secondary bacterial infection. Again, remember, zinc is the key. Their main trick for ensuring the protocols failed as well was to wait until late in the disease process before administering hydroxychloroquine. Risch pointed out that Fauci's need for, quote, randomized placebo-controlled trials is unethical. To deny patients promising medications during a pandemic, particularly like those like hydroxychloroquine with a long-standing safety record, end quote. Let's hear from Dr. Harvey Risch.
As we look back over the last 29 months, what has been, and maybe this we could do an entire book on this question, brother, but what's been the biggest lie that even you, as someone at the upper echelons of these institutions, is just like, how is anyone with a straight face actually attempting to sell this, regardless of whether they've been bought and sold or not?
Oh, that's a difficult question because there's so many. To me, the biggest lie is the FDA webpage on hydroxychloroquine. So the FDA webpage was mounted July 1st of 2020. It's been there for 2 years. It's a fraud. The webpage says, warning, hydroxychloroquine should not be used in outpatient treatment because of risk of cardiac adverse events. That's in the big bold letters. And then underneath, in small print, it says, we base this warning on adverse events that we've observed in the treatment of hospitalized patients. Now, there's two things about this. First is that COVID-19 is a completely different disease in outpatients and hospital patients. In outpatients, it's a flu-like illness with cough, muscle aches, fever, sore throat, sneezing, and so on, tiredness, headaches, the standard things that people get in, severe colds or flu. However, on about day 8 plus or minus, in a subset of people, they progress to a more intense pulmonary illness. That's an pneumonia-like illness where the immune system overreacts and deposits a lot of immune debris in the lungs and makes breathing difficult and oxygenation difficult. That's a kind of acute respiratory distress syndrome that requires hospitalization. That's a totally different disease. It has a different treatment. It is totally unrelated to outpatient treatment. Nevertheless, the FDA said we base our recommendation against outpatient treatment on the basis of hospital experience. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you can understand that if the FDA actually had any evidence to support adverse events in the treatment of outpatients, it would have said that. On a website talking about outpatient treatment, if they thought they could suppress outpatient treatment because they had evidence in outpatients, they would have used that. That would have been the first line of argument. And since that is missing from this webpage, it proves that they do not have systematic evidence of outpatient ill effects in using hydroxychloroquine in outpatients. Now, why this is the biggest lie is that this was the crux of the whole pandemic in the first place. That the suppression of hydroxychloroquine started before anybody even knew there was a pandemic. and before President Trump had even said anything. It started, to my knowledge, in fall of 2019, when the Minister of Health in France changed the status of hydroxychloroquine from an over-the-counter medication that anybody could just go to the drugstore and buy to a prescription-only medication. She cited completely false theory that hydroxychloroquine was what was called genotoxic, that it had caused genetic damage in cells. This is completely impossible. This medication's been used in tens of billions of doses in hundreds of millions of people for half a century or more. It is one of the most important medications on the World Health Organization's list of the top 50 required medicines. It's used in pregnant women, in infants and children. It's just one of the safest medications known. And yet the FDA had the nerve to purport to say that somehow a very safe medication that everybody knows is safe is somehow suddenly unsafe to be used in outpatients. And by the way, we're not showing you any data that it's unsafe. So this is the biggest lie. Had this medication been used at the outset of this pandemic, it would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives that were needlessly lost because this was suppressed for a year while patients waited for vaccines, and whatever one thinks of the vaccines. This time period of a year lost led to hundreds of thousands of unnecessary deaths that would have been treated. And had we been able to treat this disease adequately, the necessity of vaccines would not nearly have been as important, and maybe not important at all. And that is the crux of the whole pandemic, that this pandemic was not used to protect the health of the population. It was used to sell vaccines and patent medications at tremendous, tremendous profit to the pharma industry with the collusion of the FDA and the CDC. And this is the nature of what we've been fighting over the last 2.5 years. Not the virus per se, but our corrupted response to the virus.
And then additionally, in August of 2020, a paper from Dr. Peter McCullough et al. Shows the efficacy of the hydroxychloroquine cocktail is based on hydroxychloroquine acting as the gun and zinc as the bullet, while azithromycin potentiates the antiviral effect. And I found that really interesting because up until now, we've talked about azithromycin being used to kind of combat secondary bacterial infection causing pneumonia. What Dr. McCullough identifies is that azithromycin actually potentiates or makes better, simply, the antiviral effect. So then back to the Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan thing, you're sick with a viral illness causing bronchitis, and those doctors are getting a $50 bonus not to give you azithromycin. It's disgusting. So how did they know about zinc? Well, in November of 2010, Dr. Ralph Barrick co-authored a paper about zinc inhibiting coronavirus in the lab and how zinc ionophores, things like hydroxychloroquine and quercetin, block the replication of these viruses. So who is Ralph Barrick? He's a virologist at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He has spent decades researching coronaviruses. His work includes studying virus evolution, vaccine development, and gain-of-function research. That's where they modify a virus to enhance it, to make it more contagious and more lethal. He collaborated with the Wuhan Institute of Virology on bat coronaviruses. In 2017, Dr. Fauci's NIAID awarded Barrick $6 million to develop remdesivir along with Gilead. From Dr. Barrick's paper, increasing the intracellular zinc concentration with zinc ionophores, that's the hydroxychloroquine and quercetin, can impair the replication of RNA viruses. RNA viruses, zinc, So zinc being increased inside the cell, and that happening because of a zinc ionophore like hydroxychloroquine and quercetin getting it in there, the zinc impairs the replication of RNA viruses. And they knew this in 2010. So what are those single-strand RNA viruses? Well, hold on, folks. RNA viruses. SARS, SARS-2, also known as COVID-19, MERS, Zika, dengue, hepatitis C, West Nile virus, poliovirus, rhinovirus, the common cold. Wait a minute. Hold up. Wait a minute. So zinc inside the cell can impair the replication of even a common cold? Yeah. I haven't had one in 5 years. Continuing on these RNA viruses, rubella, norovirus, which causes the stomach flu. That's the one we hear about all the time on the cruise ships. Influenza, A, B, and C. Measles, mumps, respiratory syncytial virus, that's RSV, rabies, Ebola, Marburg, and hantavirus. Wait a minute. A lot of those are the viruses that they want to vaccinate us for, aren't they? And Dr. Ralph Barrick in 2010 reported that zinc inside the cell stops the replication of all of those viruses. Holy shit. So I had the privilege of briefly interviewing Dr. Zelenko's brother, Frank, recently. Frank is a wonderful man, and I'm so happy that he took his time to speak with me. So Frank assisted Dr. Zelenko gathering data and assisting patients getting their prescriptions at the very onset when they were beginning to try to help people. When, that time frame when he was giving everybody zinc and hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin and writing letters to President Trump. And Frank described it as a 24-hour operation. And it was difficult because they started getting the pushback and pharmacies didn't want to fill the prescriptions. And so he said, like, for one patient, I might have to try to get to 5 or 6 different pharmacies to get one patient's prescriptions filled. Frank very humbly stated that he is just simply a witness to a miracle, that they treated over 3,000 patients and they recovered. I asked him, what was Dr. Zelenko's most important message to the world? He answered, quote, the same treatment that we used for COVID, the single-strand RNA virus treatment protocol, would destroy the vaccine and pharmaceutical cartels. And Ralph Barrick, the EcoHealth Alliance, funded by Dr. Fauci's NIAID and the Wuhan Institute of Virology, weaponizing coronavirus, knew this. They knew this. Let's hear from Dr. Zelenko.
So there's a class of viruses called single-stranded RNA viruses. And some of those viruses include all the COVID strains, COVID-19, influenza virus, RSV virus, Marburg virus, Ebola virus, hantavirus, and there are a few others. The point being is that they all are single-stranded RNA viruses that use the same common pathway in making copies of their genetic material. That's something called RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. That's what I've been talking about for the last 2 years in the context of COVID-19. But if we extrapolate that to think more broadly, then it's the same mechanism of treatment using zinc ionophores and zinc could inhibit all the strains of COVID-19, influenza virus, RSV virus, Ebola virus, Marburg virus, and hantavirus. This has tremendous amount of national security implications. And I don't think anyone realizes this. And so I'm pleading with our scientists and the honest people in our government to investigate this, because as the recent chatter in the news is going, we're seeing hemorrhagic fever from China. There's concern about Marburg virus, hantavirus, and Ebola virus. These viruses carry, to some estimates, 90% death rates. So I think there may be a solution to all these huge public health and bioterrorist problems, all with one simple, cheap, oral approach. Basically.
So that video is a couple years old, obviously. And most recently, we heard about measles in Texas and how everybody needs to get out and get your children vaccinated. Measles is a single-strand RNA virus that can be treated with zinc and a zinc ionophore. We've also heard about bird flu, H5N1. Guess what? It's a single-strand RNA virus. So I will speak for myself. I have quite the stockpile of quercetin, zinc, and hydroxychloroquine in my home to treat my family. Take that however you'd like. So what about that over-the-counter hydroxychloroquine available worldwide? On January 13th, 2020, when rumors of Wuhan flu began to circulate, Dr. Risch kind of spoke to this, the French government took the suspicious step of reassigning hydroxychloroquine from over-the-counter to prescription required. Essentially, they banned over-the-counter sales. And then Canada followed several weeks later. A physician from Zambia reported to Dr. Risch that organized buyers emptied stores of hydroxychloroquine and burned the medications. South Africa destroyed 2 tons of life-saving hydroxychloroquine in late 2020, citing violations of import regulations. And even right here, the U.S. government in 2021 ordered the destruction of more than 1,000 pounds of hydroxychloroquine due to improper importation. Finally, the last dose of deception that really rocked me as a nurse, and I know this has been a long episode, hang with me. Congress passed and President Trump signed into law the CARES Act. It was a $2.2 trillion stimulus on March the 27th of 2020. CARES was Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. While I believe this was a necessary measure to prevent economic collapse, it was done hastily and it was wrought with fraud. We know that now. And measures meant to provide relief were utilized in nefarious ways out of greed. After all, we, the taxpayers, and our children and grandchildren were ultimately covering the tab. While we were all distracted with our $1,200 stimulus checks, and our additional $600 a week in unemployment, CMS increased inpatient reimbursement by 20%, applied to the entire hospital bill for patients diagnosed with COVID-19. So complex cases, ICU or ventilator use, that hospital bill ranged from $131,965 to $472,213. Add 20% to that. And I can tell you that early on, when I was sitting my little rear end at home, awakening from the mass formation psychosis, sitting at home on unemployment because all outpatient surgery had been canceled and all the resources sent to the hospitals to take care of, all the pandemic patients, I spoke with colleagues, one in particular, that a physician who had come out of retirement to go help. And he was working at Elmhurst Hospital in New York. And this was at the height of the pandemic. And what he explained was that he was intubating 12 to 15 patients a shift, which is a lot. But that they were bypassing the non-rebreather mask and going from nasal cannula to ventilator to protect providers. So let me break this down for you. If you come into the emergency room and you're having shortness of breath, the first thing I'm going to do is put nasal cannula oxygen in your nose. Those are the little prongs in your nose, and I'm going to start you at 2 liters of nasal cannula oxygen. If we still can't get your oxygen saturation rates, and that's measured by that little red light on your fingertip, if we can't get your oxygen above 92, 93, then we're going to bump you to 4 liters of nasal cannula oxygen. And then again, up to 6 liters of nasal cannula oxygen. Now I got to move to a different adjunctive respiratory therapy. So most commonly, you would move to what's called a non-rebreather mask. And that's a mask that goes over your face, and it has this reservoir bag. And when I crank that one on, I can get your oxygen levels up to 80, anywhere from 80 to 100% on non-rebreather mask. The problem with that is that it has these little ports on the side of the mask. So when you exhale, your exhaled air comes out through those ports and into the room. And so providers at the height of the pandemic, not knowing if this thing was airborne or what we were dealing with, chose that if you couldn't maintain your oxygen saturations on nasal cannula, that you would be intubated. Because when you're intubated, I'll show you with a pen. When you're intubated, there's a tube that goes in your mouth, through your vocal cords, down, basically a tube into your lung. That tube is then attached to tubing that goes to the ventilator that then supports your respiratory efforts. Most of the time you're sedated, so you're not bucking the machine. But that's how a ventilator works. It's a closed system. So it was safer for providers. And they were making $131,000 to $472,000 on ventilator cases. General average hospital stay was $45,683. They got an additional 20% off of that. However, it required a positive COVID test to qualify. So they tested everyone. Did you break your wrist? You're getting a COVID test. Having a gallbladder attack? You're getting a COVID test. And based on those incentives, now that we understand PCR testing and cycle thresholds, what do you think the cycle threshold was for those tests? If they got a 20% bonus if your test was positive. Huh? What do you think those cycle thresholds were run at? The act also established what was called NCTAP. That's the New COVID-19 Treatments Add-on Payment. So this was in effect from November 2020 until September 30th of 2023. Hospitals were given additional bonuses for using remdesivir, also known as Veklury. Let's hear from Dr. Paul Merrick about remdesivir.
In my hospital, I was banned or discouraged from using off-label drugs which we use every day, methylprednisolone, vitamin C. My hospital would not allow me to use vitamin C. We're talking about basic, safe drugs. And it's an outrage. What they wanted me to use was remdesivir. Where remdesivir, we know, and this is not controversial, we know according to the WHO, remdesivir increases your risk of kidney failure 20-fold. Remdesivir will increase your risk of developing renal failure 20-fold. It increases your risk of dying by about 4%. It has no place in medicine, yet the federal government will give hospitals a 20% bonus on the entire hospital bill if you prescribe this toxic medication. So you can see how the hospitals and the healthcare systems are now subservient to industry rather than doing what's best for their patients.
Yeah. So kidney failure. Remdesivir caused kidney failure. Wouldn't kidney failure increase your fluid load? The kidneys are not able to process fluid the way they normally would. Weren't we hearing providers comment about how strange it was that patients' lungs were filled with fluid and how the pulmonary pressure from that fluid made it difficult to ventilate patients? Yeah, remdesivir. The pet drug of Dr. Fauci and Dr. Gates, the drug that Dr. Ralph Baric and Gilead Sciences received taxpayer-funded grants to produce after collaborating in Wuhan on gain-of-function of coronaviruses. That same remdesivir was pulled from the Ebola trials because it was so deadly. The average cost of hydroxychloroquine, $10 for an entire course. Remdesivir on patent, $3,000 a course. Our hospitals, the corporate health systems that own and dictate protocols to our doctors, like you just heard Dr. Merrick testify to, received bonuses. And the final kicker for me, the CARES Act reinforced the PrEP Act. The PrEP Act was passed in 2005. It's the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. Yeah, who was president then? So Health and Human Services expanded on that PrEP Act via declarations in 2020 that hospitals and providers were provided immunity. They were protected from lawsuits related to adverse outcome for COVID-19 countermeasures like remdesivir, like vaccines, ventilators, or any other approved treatments, as long as they followed FDA guidelines or EUA protocols, unless there was willful misconduct. So let me ask you, how would a sedated, intubated, sick as shit patient give informed consent for the remdesivir they were receiving? How would exactly willful misconduct be proven when patient families were denied access to their loved ones while they were in the hospital? I only have one word: nefarious. So we're going to close with a tribute to Dr. Zelenko. He was a hero. And please, please share this video, because people need to know this. People need to understand the depth and the breadth of the deception that we were fed. Because, like we learned, it's when we stop accepting it that it stops working. So we're going to keep exposing. Ivermectin is up next. So make sure you're following this channel, and I will see you next Tuesday for Doses of Deception. God bless you.
Dr. Zelenko is a family physician who has successfully treated well over 7,000 COVID-19 patients with his Zelenko protocol.
I receive daily death threats. I risk my life, my career, my reputation, my family, everything, just to sit here and tell you what I'm telling you.
For his brave commitment to the people, Dr. Zelenko has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
But that really doesn't mean much to me. What matters is that we can use this platform to spread the true narrative and maybe save even more life.
I had the honor of sitting down with Dr. Zelenko to discuss his latest contribution to the health and wellness of all people. Let's talk about your latest formula, why you created it, and the results that it's having around the world.
Well, the reason why I created it was because Governor Cuomo made an executive order that blocked access to hydroxychloroquine to my patients.
We have an executive order that limits the prescription of hydroxychloroquine.
I'd like my prescription for hydroxychloroquine.
According to the state, it's only allowed for it to be dispensed through a clinical trial.
This is not a controlled substance. This is an FDA-approved medication. The hydroxychloroquine had a very specific role in my treatment plan. It was a zinc delivery system. I did research, and of all places on the NIH servers, I found papers saying that quercetin together with vitamin C, it's a zinc delivery system. Your doctor doesn't want to give you medicine, your government is blocking access. But now I can tell you, go to the vitamin shop, buy quercetin, buy vitamin C, D, and zinc, and this is how you use it, and you'll be okay. And so that's what I did. I open sourced this information.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to rage on, one doctor has come out saying Americans should not be as worried as they are about the virus.
Go to the vitamin shop, get quercetin, get vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, and you'll be okay. I felt it was so urgent and so important that I spammed the world with it.
Dr. Zelenko has been the tip of the spear in treating COVID-19 patients.
He's been nominated for the Presidential Medal of Freedom, nominated for the Nobel Prize. He's provided counsel to the White House personnel, multiple governments, hospitals, physicians, public figures, and has published in top peer-reviewed journals with world-renowned
extra special guest in here, Dr. Vladimir Zelenko.
Today we have an exclusive interview with Dr. Zev Zelenko.
Dr. Vladimir Zelenko. Dr. Vladimir Zev Zelenko.
You're helping people. You're saving lives.
He is famous for the Zelenko protocol.
It's life-saving stuff. It's over the counter.
But it's Zelenko's combination of meds that make his protocol unique.
Calls from health officials from countries including Israel, Ukraine, and Russia, along with requests from some world leaders, is just a snapshot of the attention Dr. Zelenko's success stories have received.
And then people started coming to me and saying, we're having trouble getting everything. Get the right dosing, and which product do we trust? Can you put it all in one bottle? So I took these ingredients, put them in one bottle, and it's priced at a little less than each individual component would be. So it just makes sense to me.
So in essence, what you've done is you have created a formula of potent vitamins and medicines that are available over the counter. And you've offered that recipe free to the people, but you've also manufactured it into a pill form to make it easier for people and even more affordable to protect us from future variants and viruses.
Well, if you're nutritionally optimized and your immune system is boosted, then
you are much more protected.
And what are the results?
For low to moderate risk patients, it shortens the disease if you take it when you're sick, or it prevents you from getting the infection in most cases. I still advocate for the use of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin in high-risk patients, but the majority of people could benefit because 70% of the American public is zinc deficient, and the majority of Americans are vitamin D deficient. That's why people get sick in the winter. The studies all show that vitamin D prevents ICU admissions. There's like almost no one in the ICU with high normal vitamin D levels. So that's in there too. And so is vitamin C. The science shows that quercetin together with vitamin C is a zinc ionophore. The zinc inhibits RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is the enzyme that viruses need to replicate, RNA viruses, and vitamin D primes your immune system. Not only the COVID virus, but also the influenza virus. There's plenty of data that shows that all the influenza viruses use the same pathway. So that's what's in Z-Stack.
And the feedback you've been receiving is very positive.
We underestimated the demand. We're selling so quickly that we're having trouble meeting the demand. There's also an emotional component here because isolation is killing many people as well. By taking it, you feel more comfortable, more confident to reintegrate into society. That's important. 3.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with pulmonary artery sarcoma, which is the deadliest cancer in the world. It's only around 10 cases a year, all found at autopsy. When someone is at this state in their life, they don't care about money, they don't care about power, they don't care about fame. Your value structure changes, and you start to focus and concentrate on what's really important in life. Family, country, humanity, compassion, kindness. I have 8 children, and I want to leave the world a little bit better and safer for them and for your children and for all of our children.
Dr. Zelenko, I want to thank you for your courage and the stand that you've taken for humanity. It's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you.
I got a letter from a doctor the other day.
We first told you about Dr. Zelenko last month. He says he's treated now 600 high-risk patients with only 2 deaths.
And, President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, called me the following day, and they were very interested.
He just said, sir, I have hundreds of patients, and I give them zinc.
I'm really glad the president mentioned zinc, because zinc is the virus killer.
The president's revelation surprised many.
I happen to be taking it.
But it didn't surprise this man, a family doctor from Orange County, Zev Zelenko.
And so my formulation in Z-Stack is based on quercetin, together with vitamin C, which then delivers the zinc into the cell, and it also has vitamin D. Vitamin D is important to upregulate your immune system.
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine. Right now, yeah.
People started calling me from all around the world, asking for counsel. And one of the first countries to embrace my protocol was Honduras. I explained to them what I was doing, and a week later they in-serviced the entire nation's medical system in pre-hospital intervention. Honduras is a country of 8 million people, very poor. They could not afford the higher, the respirators and the hospital beds and the newer technologies, so they were forced to rely on cheaper, older methods, and they were desperate. And this is a matter of record, historical record. President Trump gave a news conference, and he says the following.
If it works, I think everybody would be in favor of it. But check with him, call him, the president of Honduras.
What Zev put in motion, the giant, long, historical effort to decapitate the snake, which is that destructive force that seeks to divide humanity from its essential sovereign goodness, is a campaign that we keep fighting. And on this dimension, where I know Zev is working in his own, in this dimension we're making progress. Turns out that a lot of the little baby serpents are running for cover right now because they know that the eagle has spotted them. And we are in a position right now where we're making phenomenal strides at reinvigorating a humanity that knows how to stand up for itself, knows how to stand together, unite against a common purpose, not to defeat an enemy, but to give rise to a light that is the brightness, that is in fact the light that guides humanity through the darkness. I am thrilled that I still find myself working every single day with my dear brother Zev. And I'm equally thrilled that we are paying tribute to the energy that he put in motion, that we each have the stewardship of carrying, so that together we find our path to fulfill our mission here, which is to let the light of truth and justice, the light of the divine, shine, so that all humanity can see it. We love you, Zev. We will always love you, and we will always honor you.
It's hard to believe that it's been a year since the passing of my dear friend, Dr. Zev Zelenko. I just wanted to say a few words and make it clear that of the hundreds of incredible people that I've had the honor and privilege of filming and sitting down with and getting to know, few have had more impact on my life than Zev. There's just something about that man. We had a connection from the moment we met, and we worked together many times. And every time that he would show up to my studio, every time that he would leave, there was this palpable, kind of blissful, buzzing energy in the air of just like, it's hard to articulate into words, but there's something infectious about his integrity, his raw honesty, being around someone who has no time to BS and nothing false about him whatsoever. He is who he is. He always was who he was in every circumstance. He cared deeply about humanity and everyone. I don't know that I'd ever met another human being that was in such pure service in the way that Zev was in life. True man of service, true man of God, and perpetually courageous, vulnerable and powerful all at the same time. I think he's the epitome of what we all have within us as human potential. I strive to be more like Zev, who always left me feeling grateful to be alive, grateful for his friendship, inspired by his love for his family, and his willingness, despite his incredible wisdom, his willingness to learn and to be childlike. I was always taken by that. So, Zev, I know that you are watching this crazy show from the best seat in the house. And I just want to say I love you, my friend. I miss you all the time. Every time I see your face in one of my videos as I'm editing, I smile. Sometimes I tear up, but I'm always left with nothing but fond memories of every experience with you, my friend. And we're here fighting the fight. A fight you got started, and a fight that we will finish together with your love and spirit. God bless you, my friend. God bless you.